Do you ever remember those dinners? The ones so good it's hard to believe we forgot them? At 70s dinner tables, these meals brought comfort and a closeness we didn't know we'd miss. How did we ever let meals like these slip away? With a name that evokes a French bistro and a flavor that feels like home-cooked comfort, chicken fricassee bridges the gap between elegance and nostalgia. This classic combines tender chicken with a creamy, flavorful sauce and an assortment of vegetables. The roots of chicken fricassee lie in French cuisine, with the term fricassee appearing as early as the 15th century. What sets it apart is the technique. Chicken pieces are first browned lightly, then simmered slowly in a sauce that often blends broth, cream, and a touch of white wine. Julia Child famously described it as halfway between a sauté and a stew. And if Julia said it, it must be true. Vegetables like carrots, celery, mushrooms, and pearl onions elevate the dish, adding texture and natural sweetness to complement the savory chicken. In many American households, this meal became a way to transform humble ingredients into something elegant. While its name might sound intimidating, chicken fricassee is surprisingly practical. It's one pot, easy to make, and the leftovers taste even better the next day, if they survive that long. Fricassee is the dish that makes you feel like you've been to Paris, even if your passport expired decades ago. Jimmy Carter's presidency was defined by a commitment to human rights and global diplomacy, and one of his signature state dinners in 1977 reflected those values. This dinner, held in honor of Middle Eastern leaders and human rights advocates, was a statement of Carter's vision for the world. The meal highlighted his emphasis on global peace and social justice, especially in the Middle East. The menu was a comforting and elegant showcase of American cuisine, beginning with roast lamb, a nod to Middle Eastern culinary traditions, followed by fresh, seasonal vegetables representing Carter's commitment to environmental issues. For dessert, peach cobbler brought a touch of Southern hospitality to the table, a reminder of the president's Georgia roots. Invited guests included leaders from the Middle East, as well as key figures in the human rights movement, with Carter aiming to build bridges across cultural divides. The dinner was a chance for the president to demonstrate U.S. leadership on the world stage, focusing on human rights and encouraging peace in a region often mired in conflict. Carter's belief in diplomacy was so strong that he famously joked, "If this dinner doesn't go well, I'll have to break out the peach cobbler for a second round of peace talks." A meal served with both purpose and charm as Carter worked to use every opportunity to make the world a better place. Potato pancakes, crispy, golden, and sizzling in a cast-iron skillet, were where leftovers became a family ritual. You could use leftover mashed potatoes from last night's dinner or go old school with grated raw potatoes, onions, eggs, and a little flour. Either way, they were slapped onto a hot pan, fried till the edges were lacy and the inside stayed soft. They weren't fancy. They were peasant food, and proud of it. A little sour cream or applesauce on the side if you had it, ketchup if you didn't. You ate them with your fingers when no one was looking. Sometimes they came out heavy, like hockey pucks. Sometimes they were light and crispy like something from Grandma's better days. In Eastern European homes, they were tradition. In American kitchens, they were improvisation. You made them because you didn't waste food, and you didn't waste time either. They reheated well in a pan and even better in a kid's memory. You didn't call them latkes unless it was Hanukkah. Otherwise, they were just potato pancakes, fried in oil, made with whatever was left, and eaten in silence, except for the crunch. One bite and the past came rushing back, hot, crispy, and deeply familiar. Cold buttermilk soup with diced cucumbers and dill was a farmhouse secret to beating the heat. When summer came heavy and the cows barely stirred, this bowl of chilled, tangy comfort brought back your appetite and your energy. The buttermilk was sharp and sour, cut with a little cream if you had it, and filled with crisp slices of fresh cucumber straight from the garden. Chopped dill added a clean green bite that lingered on the tongue. Sometimes a hard-boiled egg or a few boiled potato cubes were stirred in for body. You poured it into chipped bowls and ate it with a spoon that clinked against the sides, the coldness rushing through your chest like a breeze across open fields. It was quiet, it was rural, and it was practical. No stove, no baking, just assembly. But somewhere between air conditioning and fast food, this little bowl of cold clarity disappeared. Today it might seem too old world, too odd, but it was the kind of food that felt like a cool cloth across your forehead. Few dishes command attention quite like a well-prepared crown roast. Traditionally served at homecoming dinners and holiday gatherings, it was the kind of dish that made guests stop and admire before the first bite. The ring of bone-in pork chops, arranged in a regal circle, was as much about presentation as it was about flavor. For families looking to impress without breaking the bank, the pork crown roast was a surprisingly economical choice. Pork was, and still is, one of the most affordable meats, and butchers often offered deals on bulk cuts. The apricot glaze, a key feature of this recipe, added just the right balance of sweetness and depth, while a bread-based stuffing packed the center for an even heartier meal. Preparing this dish took skill and patience. The roast had to be properly Frenched, tied, and slow-cooked to achieve that juicy, tender texture. But for many home cooks, the challenge was worth the reward. Unfortunately, as home butchering became a lost art and families shifted toward convenience meals, the crown roast started to disappear from dinner tables. Hamburger hash is the unsung hero of the frugal kitchen. Born out of necessity and ingenuity, this dish has been rescuing leftovers and stretching budgets for decades. The concept is simple: ground beef, diced potatoes, and onions cooked together in a skillet. But its simplicity is exactly what makes it timeless. The origins of hash can be traced to the 17th century, when the term came from the French word hacher, meaning to chop. In America, it evolved into a practical way to repurpose leftover meats. By the 20th century, hamburger hash became a staple in many households, particularly during tough economic times, when every ingredient had to count. Potatoes were the perfect partner, cheap, filling, and versatile. Onions, meanwhile, brought a touch of sweetness to balance the savory beef. Some cooks added a sprinkle of paprika or a dash of Worcestershire sauce for an extra punch of flavor. While it may not have the glamour of a Sunday roast, hamburger hash had one major advantage. It came together fast, a blessing on busy weeknights. Hamburger hash proves that even leftovers can shine, especially if you fry them just right. It's a humble dish with a big heart, reminding us that great meals don't need complicated recipes. Stuffed peppers. Forget those boring pre-made things you see at the grocery store, because stuffed peppers are here to save the day. We're talking about the beautiful bell peppers Grandma made on Thanksgiving. Vibrant red, yellow, or orange peppers are hand-picked and carefully hollowed out and then stuffed with a flavorful mixture of fluffy rice, seasoned ground meat, and your choice of chopped vegetables. Once stuffed, these peppers are baked to perfection until they are tender and crisp. Now, this isn't just a casual meal. Whipping up a stuffed pepper might make you feel like a master chef in the kitchen. It's also a great way to use up leftover rice and ground meat. Bonus points: if you use their visual appeal to trick your children into getting their daily dose of veggies. Yeah, the little ones don't really go for the green peppers on the table, but they might just love these stuffed peppers. You might even add some cheese to top it off. Unfortunately, it is one of those dishes that has faded from many dinner tables. George W. Bush's 2007 state dinner was an elegant affair designed to celebrate the enduring bond between the United States and the United Kingdom. Hosted in honor of Queen Elizabeth II's visit, the dinner marked a moment of reflection on the long history of shared values, friendship, and collaboration between the two nations. The menu was a refined choice of classic British-inspired dishes with a touch of American flair. Guests enjoyed Dover sole, a delicate and prized fish from the waters of the English Channel, paired with a light spring pea soup to start the meal. For dessert, a traditional British trifle offered a sweet, layered finish to the evening, with fruit, sponge cake, and custard. Queen Elizabeth II and her husband, Prince Philip, were the distinguished guests of honor, with numerous U.S. political leaders in attendance. The dinner was a tribute to the special relationship between the two countries, emphasizing the mutual respect and enduring alliance forged over decades. In keeping with royal tradition, President Bush joked that he had spent considerable time practicing his British accent in preparation for the dinner. The event was about celebrating the personal ties that have long bound the US and the UK. As Bush noted, the Queen doesn't just rule, she rules with grace. A fitting tribute to a monarch who had witnessed so much history. Liver and onions was not a favorite, but it was a standard, especially in homes that believed in iron-rich dinners and cleaning your plate. The smell hit you first, thick and unmistakable, filling every corner of the house. Sliced beef liver tossed in flour, fried in bacon fat or oil, and topped with sweet caramelized onions. It was the meal you endured rather than craved, but it had a purpose. It came from a generation that did not waste food or nutrients. Dads grew up on it. Moms cooked it because it was cheap, and kids ate it because you do not get dessert otherwise. The texture was dense, the flavor was deep, and the onions made it bearable, even tasty for some. It was not trendy, not fun, and certainly not pretty, but it fed the body and the spirit of thrift. There was pride in eating what others would throw away. Liver and onions asked you to be grateful, not picky. It was dinner that reminded you life was not always sweet, but it was always worth chewing through. For decades, stuffed bell peppers were a staple of the American dinner table. They were practical, inexpensive, and packed with flavor. Families in the mid-20th century relied on simple, hearty meals, and this dish delivered. With just a few basic ingredients, ground beef, rice, tomatoes, and a well-seasoned filling, home cooks could create a meal that was both satisfying and visually appealing. Peppers were an accessible ingredient, easy to grow in backyard gardens and cheap at the store. Their natural shape made them the perfect edible container, eliminating the need for extra cookware. The filling, often stretched with rice to make the meat go further, was an economical way to feed a large family on a budget. Baked until tender, the peppers absorbed the savory juices, creating a dish that was both rustic and comforting. But as convenience foods took over, stuffed peppers began to fade from dinner rotations. The rise of prepackaged meals and fast food options meant fewer people were willing to spend time hollowing out peppers and slow-baking a homemade filling. Today, the dish still makes an occasional appearance in nostalgic cookbooks, but it's no longer a household staple. Spaghetti with meatballs and garlic bread is an iconic meal that combines Italian tradition with American innovation. While pasta with tomato sauce has roots deep in Italian cuisine, the pairing of spaghetti with meatballs became popular in the United States in the early 20th century, thanks to Italian immigrants looking to recreate familiar dishes in a new land. The meatball itself is believed to have evolved from a mix of ground meats, herbs, and breadcrumbs, often made from leftovers. In Italy, smaller meatballs were served as part of a larger meal, but when Italian-American cooks began to serve them as a standalone dish, they became the hearty centerpiece of spaghetti dinners. The combination of savory meatballs, tomato sauce, and long strands of spaghetti soon became synonymous with comfort and family meals. No spaghetti dinner would be complete without garlic bread. While garlic bread wasn't traditionally Italian, it quickly became a staple in American Italian cuisine. The golden, crispy texture of the bread, combined with the rich garlic butter, complements the pasta perfectly. Remember when your mom used to whip you up lunch for school along with a heartfelt note and a sweet treat? Meat and potato patties were a staple back in the day and a hit in the lunchbox. If you've got some leftover mashed potatoes lying around, you've got to try these. Yeah, these are basically patties made out of mashed potatoes combined with seasoned ground meat, shaped into little discs, and fried till golden brown. They pair perfectly with ketchup, your favorite dipping sauce, or even a dollop of sour cream for a tangy twist. Meat and potato patties are the ultimate finger food that is still a hit to this day. Well, with McDonald's French fries on the rise, these really don't make an appearance that often, but you can whip these patties up anytime. They're surprisingly easy to make. Just give your mom a call and ask for the recipe. Bill Clinton's 1994 state dinner in honor of Nelson Mandela was a historic moment marking the dawn of a new era for South Africa. Following Mandela's release from prison and his country's transition to democracy, the dinner symbolized the triumph of equality and reconciliation in a nation that had once been divided by apartheid. The menu reflected Southern American cuisine, a fitting tribute to Mandela's journey and the cultural ties between the US and South Africa. Guests were treated to crab cakes, a coastal delicacy, followed by collard greens, a southern staple, and sweet potato pie for dessert. The meal was rich in both flavor and significance, connecting the hearts of Americans and South Africans alike. Invited to the dinner were Mandela and key South African leaders, along with prominent US politicians, making the event a significant diplomatic gathering. The dinner was about honoring Mandela's leadership and the profound change his presidency had brought to his country. It celebrated South Africa's newfound democracy and the end of racial injustice. Clinton, known for his casual approach, joked, "This is the kind of meal where you don't just talk about reconciliation, you feel it in every bite." The dinner, like Mandela himself, proved that change was not only possible but could be delicious too. Cheesy broccoli rice casserole made vegetables feel like an indulgence. In an era where frozen veggies were the norm and kids turned their noses up at anything green, this dish was a miracle. Cooked white rice, thawed broccoli, a can of cream soup, and a heavy chunk of Velveeta, all stirred together and baked into a golden, bubbling casserole. It was thick, creamy, and just salty enough to satisfy a tired adult and trick a picky child. It smelled like warmth, it looked like effort, and it tasted like someone still cared. The kind of food that stayed hot even after you came back for seconds. It was never elegant, but it was loved. The dish could stretch to feed 5 or just 2 with leftovers for the lunchbox. No one bragged about it, but everyone cleaned their plates. In houses where money was counted and casseroles were king, this cheesy, starchy wonder was the great equalizer. Even dads who hated broccoli grew to respect this one. Chicken feet and dumplings with collard green broth made sure nothing went to waste. Every part of the bird was used, and the feet, once cleaned and simmered, released a gelatin that thickened the soup and made it silky. The dumplings were flour and fat, dropped by spoonfuls into the bubbling pot, soaking up all the flavor like sponges of survival. The broth was built on collard greens, wilted and steeped until they lent their earthiness to every bite. This was not a fancy dinner. It was a necessary one. In black farming communities across the South, this dish was standard, hearty, humble, and rich with culture. It was the kind of food that looked thin in the bowl but sat heavy in the belly. Today, we have forgotten the skill it takes to coax nourishment out of the neglected parts of the pantry. But this meal, every last finger bone and dumpling, was a lesson in gratitude, ingenuity, and care. Before slow cookers and instant meals, there was fricassee, a dish that turned simple ingredients into something extraordinary. This creamy chicken stew had roots in European cooking, but became a homecoming dinner favorite in American kitchens, especially in the South and Midwest. It was rich, comforting, and made the most of what was available. Chicken fricassee was the perfect example of resourceful cooking. In the days when whole chickens were bought instead of pre-cut parts, every bit was used. The meat was gently simmered in a velvety sauce made from broth, butter, and cream, creating a dish that felt indulgent without being expensive. Paired with dumplings or rice, it was a filling meal that stretched to feed a crowd. What made fricassee special was its balance between rustic and refined. Unlike fried or roasted chicken, this method kept the meat exceptionally tender, absorbing the sauce's deep flavors. Some families added carrots and peas, while others preferred a touch of sherry for extra depth. But no matter the variation, it was a dish meant to be ladled generously and served with warm, crusty bread. So why did it disappear? As boneless, skinless chicken breasts became the norm, slow-cooked dishes like this fell out of favor. This creamy, savory casserole, ham tetrazzini with egg noodles, showcases how a few simple ingredients can be transformed into something truly special. While turkey tetrazzini is more commonly known, ham tetrazzini became a popular variation, especially for using up leftover holiday ham in a way that felt both indulgent and comforting. Named after Italian opera singer Luisa Tetrazzini, this dish originally featured chicken or turkey, often paired with a creamy sauce, mushrooms, and a variety of seasonings. The exact origin of ham tetrazzini is unclear, but the combination of a rich, buttery sauce and tender ham makes it a favorite for families seeking a hearty, filling meal. Egg noodles, thanks to their soft texture and ability to absorb sauces, are the perfect base for this casserole. When tossed with the ham and creamy sauce, they turn into a flavorful foundation that holds everything together. A sprinkle of Parmesan cheese on top before baking creates a golden, bubbly crust that takes the dish to another level. Chicken fried steak. This classic is long gone but never forgotten. This one's pretty easy to make too. All you need is a chicken steak dredged in a seasoned flour mixture, dipped in a wet batter, and finally coated in a crispy breading. Fry till it's golden brown for the perfect dinner that'll leave you wanting more. Chicken fried steak is typically served with a creamy gravy for dipping, along with mashed potatoes and vegetables for a complete and oh-so-satisfying meal. It is basically American, and the yassified version of the Austrian dish Wiener Schnitzel, and the Italian dish cotoletta alla Milanese. Fancy names, but the same old fried chicken steak. Now I know what you're thinking. Why did this crispy golden goodness leave us too soon? Well, you can trick yourself all you want, but it's not the healthiest dinner out there. But hey, having a fried steak once in a while can't do much harm, right? Just be prepared for some finger-licking good action. This dish is messy, but in the best way possible. Ramen noodle stir-fry was the poor man's lo mein, the college kid's weeknight miracle, the single parent's ace in the hole. You started with a packet of instant ramen. Any flavor, though chicken or beef were the classics. Toss the seasoning packet or save it for something else. Boil the noodles till soft, drain them, then fry them up with whatever you had. Frozen mixed vegetables? Perfect. A leftover hot dog? Toss it in. A splash of soy sauce and maybe some garlic or hot sauce if you had it. Suddenly, you weren't just eating ramen, you were making dinner. It was quick, it was hot, and it felt like an upgrade. You learned the ratios over time. Too much soy and it got salty, not enough oil, and it stuck. Sometimes it burned, sometimes it sang. You made it in hand-me-down pans on flickering electric stoves with a baby on your hip or the TV blaring in the next room. It wasn't gourmet, it was resourceful. The kind of meal that made you feel like maybe, just maybe, you were pulling life together one cheap noodle at a time. And in those quick, quiet moments, it almost tasted like victory. Sour cream and onion-fried cabbage cakes were born from boredom. You can only eat boiled cabbage so many ways before you start to rebel, even during rationing. So clever hands found a way to reinvent the leftover greens, chopped finely, mixed with mashed potatoes, onion, and a scoop of sour cream, then pan-fried until crisp and golden. What emerged was somewhere between a latke and a hush puppy, tender in the middle and whispering with steam. These little cakes were served plain with applesauce or next to whatever protein was available, though they could hold their own as a meal. You could smell them cooking from outside the house, especially in winter when anything fried seemed like a gift from the heavens. These days, cabbage has gone back to being either raw in salads or lost in a soup pot. But once, it was the star of the skillet, crisping in bacon grease and proving that even leftovers could become legends. Few side dishes could bridge the gap between savory and sweet as effortlessly as corn pudding. A staple of Southern and Midwestern homecoming dinners, this dish combined farm-fresh simplicity with a rich, custard-like texture. Families often served it alongside roasted meats or holiday spreads, where its golden hue and delicate sweetness made it a comforting favorite. Whether fresh off the cob in the summer or canned in colder months, it was inexpensive and widely available. This recipe used basic pantry staples, butter, milk, eggs, and a touch of sugar, to create a dish that felt indulgent despite its humble ingredients. Baking was the preferred method, allowing the custard to set while keeping the kernels tender. Some families swore by a cast-iron skillet, while others used deep casserole dishes to achieve that perfect golden crust. Recipes varied. Some included a splash of vanilla, others added a pinch of nutmeg. But the result was always a creamy, spoonable side that paired with almost anything. As processed cornbread mixes and quick-fix alternatives took over, traditional corn pudding was left behind. But for those who remember its warm, velvety bite, It's a dish worth bringing back. No dish says Sunday dinner like a pot roast simmering away, filling the house with the unmistakable aroma of comfort. Pot roast was an event, the centerpiece of countless family gatherings. Originating in France, pot au feu inspired what we now call pot roast, combining tougher cuts of beef with slow cooking to create something tender and flavorful. In America, the pot roast became a household favorite thanks to its practicality. Chuck roast, brisket, or round, these cuts weren't fancy, but with the magic of a Dutch oven or slow cooker, they transformed into melt-in-your-mouth perfection. Carrots, potatoes, and onions balanced the rich beef with earthy sweetness and hearty texture. The beauty of pot roast is its patience. It doesn't demand attention, just time. It's a dish that rewards you for slowing down, a rarity in today's grab-and-go world. As one home cook joked, it's the only dish that cooks itself while you're watching Sunday football. And we shall not forget the gravy, a pot roast's crowning glory. Thickened with pan drippings, it's the glue that holds this masterpiece together. If love had a flavor, pot roast might just be it. The Hungarians really killed it with dinners that shaped our childhood, because we've got another banger on the list. Hungarian goulash was everyone's favorite cozy, hearty meal back in the day. Goulash is a hearty stew whipped up with tender chunks of beef simmered in a rich, savory sauce brimming with paprika. Yeah, paprika was huge back in the day. So why did this delicious dinner vanish from our dinner tables? Well, the Hungarian goulash traces back as far as the 10th century to stews eaten by the shepherds, so you can say this one might just have run its course. But hey, if you're ever craving goulash, dust off some old cookbooks and get to work because it really isn't hard to wump up. This is the perfect dish for a chilly night in, curled up on the couch with a good movie. Just be careful not to spill it on your mom's vintage tablecloth. Those things are irreplaceable. Richard Nixon's 1972 state dinner marked a historic moment in U.S. diplomacy, the first official visit to China by a sitting American president. This dinner symbolized the thawing of Cold War tensions and the beginning of a new chapter in U.S.-China relations. The guest of honor, Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai, sat across from Nixon, with both leaders eager to foster a new diplomatic era. The menu was designed to honor Chinese culture while offering a taste of traditional Chinese cuisine. The dinner began with the iconic Peking duck, roasted to perfection and served with thin pancakes and hoisin sauce, a true Chinese delicacy. Shark fin soup followed a dish that has long been a symbol of Chinese fine dining. Dim sum, a beloved Chinese appetizer, rounded out the menu, offering a variety of small, flavorful bites. Nixon's guest list was a carefully chosen mix of Chinese officials and U.S. dignitaries, all part of a delicate diplomatic dance aimed at building trust between the two nations. The dinner was a clear message that the U.S. was ready to establish closer ties with China, moving beyond decades of isolation. Nixon, known for his keen understanding of symbolism, reportedly said, "If you can get the Chinese to eat dinner with you, you can talk politics." And talk they did, over a delicious historic meal that forever changed global diplomacy. Turkey Divan was how leftovers became legend. You started with dry bits of Sunday's bird, some broccoli from the freezer, and a can of cream of chicken soup. Then came the magic, a cheese sauce, sometimes called mornay if you wanted to sound fancy, poured over everything and baked until bubbly. It came out golden, rich, and smelling like someone tried. That mattered. It was a casserole that masked fatigue, dressed up scraps, and made Tuesday dinner feel like Thanksgiving's secret encore. Dads liked it. Moms knew it was efficient. Kids just remembered the gooey forkfuls and how broccoli did not taste like punishment when it was drowning in cheese. In the 1980s, dishes like this were culinary glue, binding time, taste, and tradition. Turkey Divan did not make headlines, but it made memories. The kind you recall when you open a fridge of leftovers and wish you could call your mother to ask how she made it taste so good. It was never just about cleaning out the fridge. It was about warming the room, feeding the family, and reminding everyone that even the scraps had value. Chipped beef and cream over fried grit cakes was a Southern solution to a national problem. During World War II, meat was rationed, and frugality ruled every kitchen. Chipped beef, dried, salty slivers of preserved beef, was a staple in both military rations and rural homes. Rehydrated in a skillet with cream, butter, and a little black pepper, it became a thick, rich gravy that could dress up anything. Instead of toast, farmers in the South used fried grit cakes, leftover grits chilled in a pan, sliced into squares and crisped in bacon fat until golden. The result was crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and perfect for soaking up that creamy meat sauce. This dish was known by many names, some polite, some not, but it was beloved all the same. It made something out of nothing. A handful of meat, a little milk, and yesterday's grits became a breakfast or supper that stuck to your bones. Chipped beef may be harder to find now, and grit cakes have been replaced by packaged everything. But this was food that made the most of what you had, and never apologized for it. For families stretching their grocery budget, few meals delivered as much flavor and comfort as these unusual-looking meatballs. A product of the Great Depression and wartime rationing, Porcupine meatballs were a creative way to make ground beef go further. Mixing rice into the meat wasn't just for texture. It bulked up the meal, making a pound of beef feed more mouths. Rice was an affordable pantry staple, and when the meatballs simmered in a tangy tomato sauce, the grains softened and expanded, giving them their signature spiky appearance. Despite the name, no porcupines were harmed in the making of this dish. Just a bit of kitchen ingenuity at work. Some recipes used canned tomato soup for a mild, creamy sauce, while others relied on crushed tomatoes and Worcestershire sauce for a sharper kick. Either way, the slow cooking process allowed the flavors to meld into a hearty, stick-to-your-ribs meal. For decades, this dish was a go-to for busy home cooks. It was easy, required minimal ingredients, and could be made in one pot, ideal for feeding a growing family. But as convenience foods and pre-made meatballs filled grocery store freezers, the homemade version started to disappear. Scalloped ham and potatoes, a classic dish that brings together two of the most beloved comfort foods, tender ham and creamy, cheesy potatoes. This casserole has been a staple at family gatherings and Sunday dinners for generations, proving that simple ingredients can create something extraordinary. The dish's origins can be traced back to the mid-19th century, where scalloped potatoes, sliced potatoes baked in a rich, creamy sauce, became a popular sign. The addition of ham likely came later, as cooks sought to stretch their budget by incorporating leftover meats. The result was a filling, satisfying dish that combined the savory goodness of ham with the comforting texture of potatoes. Scalloped ham and potatoes became even more popular in the 20th century when convenience foods like canned soups and processed cheese made their way into American kitchens. The creamy sauce, often made from a blend of milk, butter, and cheese, is what binds the layers of ham and potatoes, creating a hearty casserole that's easy to make but feels like a special meal. Scalloped ham and potatoes is the ultimate use-it-all dish, because who doesn't love a meal where everything gets smothered in cheese? It's a dish that's perfect for feeding a crowd and always leaves everyone asking for seconds. Now, Swiss steak is like a warm hug from the past. This dish is all about slow-cooked, fall-apart tender beef bathed in a tangy tomato sauce. Think slow cooker vibes, but way before slow cookers were even a thing. Now, the Swiss steak is all about patience. The longer you simmer the beef, the more melt-in-your-mouth delicious it becomes. It's also the perfect way to use up that tougher cut of meat you accidentally grabbed at the store. If you grew up thinking this dish was from Switzerland, as the name suggests, now would be a good time for me to tell you your whole life was a lie. This technique of cooking up tender meat came from England, so they're the ones to thank for this meaty goodness. I can just imagine the satisfying experience of cutting through that tender beef with minimal effort. Swiss steak, a dinnertime classic that deserves a comeback. Where do I sign the petition? Gerald Ford's presidency began under challenging circumstances, with the U.S. recovering from the turmoil of the Watergate scandal. In 1974, Ford hosted a state dinner that aimed to restore both domestic and international confidence in the U.S. administration. This dinner was as much about diplomacy and rebuilding trust as it was about the carefully chosen menu designed to impress European leaders and key U.S. political figures. The evening featured a sumptuous array of dishes, starting with beef Wellington, an elegant dish showcasing perfectly cooked beef wrapped in puff pastry, a symbol of refinement. Lobster Newburg followed, an indulgent and decadent dish popular in upscale dining circles. For dessert, Ford's guests were treated to a rich chocolate mousse, a fitting end to an evening meant to impress both the taste buds and the political world. The guest list included European leaders, notably from NATO countries, and influential U.S. political elites. The purpose of the dinner was clear. Ford wanted to assure the world that the U.S. was steady, strong, and ready to maintain its leadership role in the face of post-Watergate uncertainty. It was about rebuilding the nation's reputation and fostering stronger relationships with Europe. Macaroni and stewed tomatoes was what happened when money ran out, but dinner still needed to appear on the table. It wasn't fancy. You boiled the macaroni, drained it, and stirred in a can or two of stewed tomatoes. Maybe you added a pat of butter. Maybe you fried up some onions in leftover bacon grease if you were lucky. The salt was generous because that's how you made it taste like something. This was a Depression-era holdover that didn't leave quietly. It stayed on stovetops well into the 1980s because it was easy, dirt cheap, and somehow comforting in its plainness. For some kids, this was their first lesson in "we don't waste food." Leftover noodles from last night became tonight's meal with a can opener and 5 minutes of heat. It wasn't gourmet. It wasn't even really satisfying. But it filled the belly and warmed the kitchen, and that was enough. If someone grated a little cheddar on top or threw in a pinch of sugar, it was practically gourmet. No one bragged about it. No one wrote it down. But ask anyone born before 1975 and they'll tell you, it kept them full on nights when paychecks didn't stretch far. Creamed spinach and poached egg over toast points was the kind of dinner you made when teeth were weak, appetites were small, but care was still strong. The spinach was boiled down soft, drained, and folded with cream, butter, and a whisper of nutmeg. Nothing fancy, just deeply nourishing. Then came the egg, gently poached so the yolk stayed golden and runny, a rich counter to the soft green below. Toast points, sliced triangles of day-old bread, crisped in a pan with a little butter or drippings, were there to give the whole dish a bit of structure. This was not a meal to impress a guest. It was a meal made at twilight, after chores were done and the room had quieted. These days it is gone from most tables, written off as too mild, too soft, too old-fashioned. But those who remember it still talk about the calm it brought, how it made you feel looked after in a world that was always moving. It was simple food with deep roots. Some of the best dishes come from necessity, and few ingredients are as dependable as potatoes. For generations, scalloped potatoes were a staple at homecoming dinners, potlucks, and Sunday feasts. Thinly sliced and baked in a rich, velvety sauce, they were a testament to the idea that simple ingredients, when treated right, could feel downright luxurious. Potatoes were the backbone of many American kitchens. They were cheap, easy to store, and could feed an entire family without much effort. The addition of a creamy sauce, made from milk, butter, and a touch of garlic, elevated this humble dish into something special. Some versions kept it simple, while others included layers of cheese, turning it into a gooey, golden masterpiece. Either way, it was a comforting, belly-filling side that paired well with just about any main course. The cooking process required patience. Proper scalloped potatoes weren't rushed. Each layer had to absorb the sauce, and the top needed time to develop that perfect golden crust. But as boxed potato mixes and instant gratins took over, homemade scalloped potatoes started to fade from dinner tables. Turkey and gravy, traditionally a centerpiece of Thanksgiving but often enjoyed beyond the holiday season, holds a special place in American culinary history. Its pairing with mashed turnips, though less common today, harkens back to a time when root vegetables were staples in kitchens for their affordability and long storage life. Turkey has been an American icon since colonial days. Benjamin Franklin famously praised the bird, calling it a much more respectable bird than the bald eagle. While roasting turkey might be associated with grand feasts, smaller versions, like turkey breasts, frequently appeared on mid-century dinner tables, making the meal more practical for everyday cooking. The star of the plate, next to the turkey, is the gravy. Made from the drippings left in the pan, it's rich, savory, and ties everything together. A good gravy, as some would say, can salvage even a dry turkey. Often overshadowed by mashed potatoes, turnips were a go-to side dish in earlier generations. Packed with nutrients and a slightly peppery flavor, they offered a lighter, unique alternative to spuds. Mashed with butter, cream, or even a touch of maple syrup, they brought earthy warmth to the plate. If turkey is the headliner, gravy is the conductor. And turnips? They're the backup singers you never knew you needed. A harmonious meal indeed. Back in the 1950s, the Divan Parisian restaurant at Chatham Hotel in New York City gave birth to its signature dish, the chicken Divan casserole. This mouth-watering dish soon found its way to all our homes, and I'm not complaining. It's made of tender chicken pieces nestled amongst vibrant green broccoli florets in a rich and creamy sauce, topped with a generous layer of melty cheese and a sprinkle of crispy breadcrumbs. The chef who leaked this recipe out to the public really took one for the team, and we can never thank him enough. It's the perfect combination of protein, veggies, and all the cheesy goodness your heart desires. Just maybe pair it with a side salad to pretend you're being healthy. Chicken Divan casserole is the retro dish of every cheese lover's dreams, and you know what that calls for? A comeback. It's a classic at throwback parties, but you don't really need an excuse to cook this up. A typical Tuesday night works too. George H.W. Bush's state dinner in 1990 was a momentous occasion, held at the end of the Cold War, a historic turning point in U.S. history. The dinner celebrated not only the triumph of democracy, but also the U.S.'s leadership in bringing an end to the decades-long standoff with the Soviet Union. Hosted in honor of Mikhail Gorbachev, the dinner marked the beginning of a new era of U.S.-Russia relations. The menu was as lavish as the occasion, beginning with a delicate lobster tail, followed by a perfectly prepared filet mignon, both symbolizing the elegance and strength of the U.S. at the time. To cap off the evening, the guests were served baked Alaska, a decadent dessert that would have made any Cold War adversary melt. Gorbachev, along with European leaders, were invited to the dinner, where the focus was on celebrating democracy's victory and fostering an atmosphere of cooperation between the U.S. and the former Soviet Union. The dinner was a powerful symbol of the diplomacy that led to the peaceful end of the Cold War and the beginning of a more hopeful international landscape. Bush, with his characteristic humor, quipped that baked Alaska was the perfect dessert to represent the collapse of the Soviet Union. A little fiery on the outside, but soft and warm on the inside. The dinner served as a reminder that while the world was changing, the U.S. would remain a steadfast leader. Salisbury steak TV dinners were the bachelor's banquet, the dad's dinner for one, the exhausted mother's silent truce with the microwave. They came in compartmentalized trays, Salisbury steak swimming in brown gravy, a scoop of mashed potatoes with a dimple of margarine, and a side of peas that somehow never defrosted evenly. You peeled back the foil, popped it in the oven or microwave, and 20 minutes later, you had a meal that looked like food. Maybe not tasted like it, but looked like it. Kids ate them cross-legged in front of the television while Wheel of Fortune spun on. Dads came home from the night shift and slid one into the oven because it beat frying an egg. These weren't luxurious, they weren't healthy, but they were consistent, and in a world full of unpredictable bills and layoffs, that mattered. The meat had a spongy chew, the gravy stuck to everything, and the mashed potatoes tasted like nothing at all. Still, it filled the plate and shut up the hunger. It was food with a fork. And when the world didn't feel warm, the glow of that TV tray, hot and humming from the microwave, almost did the trick. Cornmeal mush with hot sorghum drizzle was what you ate when you had almost nothing. Just cornmeal, salt, water, and thyme. Cooked low and slow until thick, then poured into a loaf pan to set. The next day, it was sliced and pan-fried in lard or bacon grease, crisp on the edges, soft in the middle. The sorghum, thick, dark, and sweet, was poured hot from a jar and turned something plain into something profound. This was a meal from the South, but it spread across farm states like wildfire during the leanest years. It filled you up and kept you going. It did not need meat, did not need variety, it needed presence. It was not a backup plan. It was the plan. And if you had a jar of sorghum in the cupboard, you were considered lucky. Because with just a few drizzles, even poverty could taste like dessert. Slow cooking was once an art form, and few dishes showcased it better than a well-braised short rib. This was a meal that required patience. Tough cuts of beef transformed into fork-tender perfection after hours of simmering in a rich, aromatic sauce. Deeply savory, fall-off-the-bone ribs were the reward for anyone willing to wait. Short ribs were once considered a budget cut, prized not for their tenderness, but for their flavor when cooked properly. Unlike steaks or roasts, these ribs needed time and care to break down the tough connective tissue. The solution was a slow braise in red wine, broth, and aromatic vegetables. Over several hours, the flavors deepened, and the meat absorbed every note of the wine's richness, creating a dish that was as elegant as it was hearty. For much of the 20th century, this was a homecoming dinner classic, perfect for cold evenings and special occasions. But as cooking habits changed, so did the popularity of slow-braised dishes. People wanted quick meals, not ones that took all afternoon. Short ribs also became more expensive as demand for premium beef cuts soared, making them less common in everyday kitchens. Roast chicken with stuffing and green beans is a meal that evokes family gatherings, holidays, and a sense of home. This classic dinner has long been a centerpiece of American dining, combining practicality with elegance. Roasting chicken is one of the oldest cooking methods, but by the 20th century, it became a weekly tradition for many households. Chickens were relatively inexpensive, easy to prepare, and, if seasoned and roasted just right, deliciously satisfying. The key to a perfect roast chicken lies in the balance: crispy, golden skin on the outside and juicy, flavorful meat inside. Stuffing or dressing, depending on your regional preference, traces back to ancient Rome. By the time it reached American kitchens, cooks used bread cubes, herbs, and sometimes vegetables to create the savory, aromatic side we know today. While traditionally cooked inside the bird, many began baking it separately for a crispier texture, what some might call progress. Green beans complete this trio, often sautéed with garlic, almonds, or a touch of bacon. They brought a fresh, vibrant contrast to the richness of the chicken and stuffing. If you roast a chicken and make stuffing, you're not just making dinner, you're making memories. And for anyone who's ever had the leftovers, the memories taste just as good the next day. So chicken paprikash is a Hungarian dish that sounds fancy, but is basically a party in a pot for your taste buds. Imagine juicy chicken pieces slow-cooked with tender onions in a creamy sauce, bursting with the warm, smoky flavor of paprika. It's served with a side of fluffy rice or noodles. Chicken paprikash really found its footing back when Chinese takeout wasn't as big of a thing. You know, back when Grandma used to put on the apron and cook for us? This dish really was the one-pot wonder. Bonus points: if your grandma used to whip this up for you, that nostalgia factor is real. A version of it still exists in Bulgarian cuisine in case you crave the it now. The Bulgarians are a little light on the paprika and center the dish on sautéed onions. Okay, creamed spinach and pearl onions didn't look the most appetizing, but trust me, it was always a hit at family dinners. Think of a rich, creamy base packed with vibrant green spinach leaves. And let's not forget the star of the show, pearl onions, that added the perfect touch of sweetness. Not only was this dinner finger-licking delicious, but it was healthy too. Jam-packed with nutrients including vitamins A, C, and K, iron, folate, potassium, and a good amount of fiber. Just don't blame me if you get flashbacks to your school cafeteria. But hey, sometimes those cafeteria classics deserve a second chance, especially when they're this delicious and healthy all at the same time. After the transformative events of the 1960s, Lyndon B. Johnson's presidency focused on healing the nation's divisions and celebrating progress, especially in the realm of civil rights. In 1965, LBJ hosted a state dinner that reflected the growing unity and the cultural changes in America, especially the strides being made in civil rights. The event was an opportunity to promote American values of equality and inclusivity, while also solidifying the country's leadership on the world stage. The menu was a celebration of Texas-style comfort food, a nod to Johnson's roots. Guests were treated to barbecued ribs, tender and flavorful, accompanied by cornbread, another Southern classic. Texas-style chili added a spicy kick, while pecan pie provided a sweet homegrown dessert to wrap up the evening. It was a dinner steeped in the traditions of the American South, designed to showcase the diversity of American culture. The guest list was diverse, with leaders from the civil rights movement and political elites in attendance. This was a deliberate move by LBJ, who was committed to building bridges within the country while navigating the challenges of a world still reeling from the tensions of the Cold War. Tater tot casserole was a symphony of simple. Ground beef browned in a pan, mixed with cream of mushroom soup, spread into a baking dish, and crowned with a perfect grid of frozen tater tots. It was like meatloaf and hash browns had a baby and raised it in the Midwest. The tots crisped in the oven while the filling turned into a savory, creamy mess. No one could resist the golden crunch followed by that hot, rich bite underneath. It was not just food, it was folklore. The kind of dish passed down from Aunt Susan to Cousin Mike with pride and a little grease stain on the recipe card. It was unfussy, easy to stretch, and beloved by the whole family. Dad called it stick-to-your-ribs food. Kids just wanted more ketchup. And Mom, exhausted from the day, knew this was one of the few dinners no one would complain about. It was not pretty, it was not healthy, but it was home. Pickled beet and hard-boiled egg supper plates did not need heat to feel warm. You pulled them straight from the icebox on a Sunday night, when the fire was low and nobody wanted to scrub another pot. The eggs were dyed purple by the beets, steeped together in vinegar and sugar for a day or more until the whites turned magenta and the yolks mellowed out. It was a farmer's version of elegance. These dishes were common after church, laid out with cold biscuits left over from breakfast, a few slices of cheese if you were lucky, and sometimes a spoonful of jam on the side for balance. It was quiet food. Humble, yes, but not boring. The tartness of the beets, the soft salt of the eggs, the crumb of biscuit still holding on. It was all done with intention. And while the beets and eggs were simple, their flavor lingered long after the plates were cleared. We traded meals like this for convenience and forgot what it meant to feel fed without fuss. When it comes to simple yet elegant meals, few combinations can match the light, flaky fish paired with the richness of lemon butter and the crispness of asparagus. Baked cod or halibut are perfect choices for this dish. Both are mild white fish that take well to a variety of seasonings, but it's the lemon butter that steals the show, bringing a burst of freshness that complements the delicate flavors of the fish. Cod and halibut have been long favorites in American kitchens, especially along the coastlines where they are abundant. Cod, with its firm texture, has been a staple in New England since the colonial era, while halibut is prized for its mild taste and large fillets. Both fish are low in fat but high in protein, making them an excellent choice for a healthy, satisfying dinner. Asparagus, often served alongside fish in this dish, is packed with vitamins and minerals, making it a nutritious addition. The key to a great asparagus side is cooking it just enough to maintain its crunch, while the lemon butter ties everything together in perfect harmony. A meal like this is a reminder that simple ingredients can create something extraordinary. Biscuits and sausage gravy. Okay. This southern staple might still be a thing in some parts of the country, but let's be real, biscuits and sausage gravy is definitely not dominating breakfast menus anymore. I guess waffles are to blame for that. But this breakfast legend is the perfect combination of fluffy buttermilk biscuits so light and airy they practically melt in your mouth, along with a creamy sausage gravy, rich with savory sausage and speckled with black pepper. This is a breakfast, or hey, no judgment here, even a dinner combination that's pure comfort food heaven. From the perfect hangover cure to a delicious weekend treat, Biscuits and sausage gravy satisfy all cravings. Just maybe lay off the white clothes while you're indulging. That sausage gravy can be a bit enthusiastic when it comes to staining. Donald Trump's 2018 state dinner was a dazzling affair, showcasing the long-standing ties between the United States and France. Held in honor of French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife, Brigitte Macron, the evening was a celebration of shared history and values. The dinner also allowed Trump to strengthen personal diplomacy, fostering closer ties with one of the U.S.'s oldest allies. The menu reflected both American and French culinary traditions, featuring a rack of lamb, an elegant French classic, paired with jambalaya, offering a taste of the American South's rich flavors. Dessert was a delicate nectarine tart, balancing sweetness with sophistication. Among the invited guests were prominent American political figures, along with a strong French delegation. The dinner was a chance for both leaders to discuss key issues such as global security, trade, and the Paris Agreement. Trump and Macron had developed a strong personal rapport, and this dinner was an opportunity to reinforce that relationship. The night's event had a certain flair of its own, as Trump reportedly joked with Macron about making the French feel at home in the U.S., saying, "Don't worry, you'll be the most elegant people in the room." However, the evening was a reflection of the enduring U.S.-French relationship, one founded on shared democratic values and a strong history of cooperation. Stuffed shells were dinner that looked like love. Not the quick kind, but the kind that took time. Boiling pasta, mixing ricotta with egg and herbs, ladling sauce, sprinkling cheese, and sliding it all into the oven. It was the kind of meal you made when the paycheck landed, the weekend started, or you wanted everyone to sit down at the table together. There was always enough to feed a neighbor or save for lunch the next day. It was filling, rich, and made a kitchen smell like a promise. The shells held the ricotta like little pockets of warmth, and the red sauce bubbled around them like a hug. No shortcuts, no mystery powders or packets. Just pasta, cheese, sauce, and the kind of effort that said, "You matter." Dads appreciated the leftovers. Kids fought over the browned edges. Moms quietly savored the first bite before anyone else sat down. It was a dish for gathering, sharing, and holding on to something solid in a fast, loud world. Gooseberry glazed pork chops with fried breaded okra was a dish that danced on the line between sweet and sharp. The gooseberries, sour and green when fresh, were cooked down with sugar into a tangy glaze that clung to the seared pork like a second skin. The meat, often from a thin chop or shoulder cut, was browned hard in a cast-iron skillet before being finished in the glaze, soaking up that lip-puckering sweetness. Beside it came okra, sliced, dredged in cornmeal and fried until golden. The outer crust crunched while the inside stayed soft and sticky, a texture only Southerners knew how to love. Gooseberries grew wild near fences and barn edges, and once they ripened, they went into everything from pies to pork. These days, you will rarely see them outside of specialty markets, and most folks would not know what to do with them anyway. But this dish was a reminder that flavor used to be chased, not just bought. And when it landed on your plate, it tasted like a southern summer in full bloom. Slow cooking was once a necessity, not a luxury. Before pressure cookers and pre-packaged meals, tougher cuts of beef were transformed through hours of gentle simmering, unlocking deep, rich flavors. This smoky chipotle beef ragu was one such dish, a meal that took time but rewarded patience with melt-in-your-mouth tenderness. Chipotle peppers, known for their earthy heat, were a staple in traditional Mexican and Southwestern cooking, but by the mid-20th century, their smoky kick found its way into American kitchens. Paired with tomatoes, garlic, and slow-braised beef, this dish delivered a bold, layered flavor that stood apart from ordinary pot roasts. Served over creamy polenta or even buttered noodles, it was both comforting and deeply satisfying. Despite its rich taste, this meal was surprisingly budget-friendly. Beef chuck or brisket, once some of the most affordable cuts, became tender and flavorful when cooked low and slow. The sauce was built from pantry staples, making it an easy, accessible choice for home cooks. But over time, as quick weeknight meals took priority and polenta lost ground to pasta and rice, this dish faded from dinner tables. Today, chipotle has seen a resurgence in trendy restaurants, but this home-style beef ragu remains a forgotten classic. While macaroni and cheese is often considered the ultimate comfort food, adding stewed tomatoes turns it into something unique, balancing the creamy, cheesy richness with a hint of tangy sweetness. Macaroni and cheese dates back to the early 1700s, with recipes appearing in both European and American cookbooks. The combination of pasta and cheese was revolutionary, and its popularity soared when processed cheese became widely available in the 20th century. By the 1950s, boxed versions made it easier than ever to bring the dish to the table. As for stewed tomatoes, they've been a pantry staple in many households, especially during the harvest season. Stewing tomatoes was a way to preserve the bounty of summer for colder months. When paired with macaroni and cheese, the acidic tomatoes cut through the richness of the cheese, providing a satisfying contrast. While it might seem like a basic dish, macaroni and cheese with stewed tomatoes is the kind of meal that hits the spot every time. Hear me out, this one might sound a little boring at first glance, but trust me, it's a classic for a reason. The split pea soup is a hearty, filling, and surprisingly healthy-ish, thick, creamy soup packed with vibrant green split peas and other vegetables like carrots, celery, and onions. Now, on that healthy-ish claim, it depends on how much butter and cream your grandma used. The split pea soup is the kind of soup that leaves you feeling satisfied for hours. It has been a St. Patrick's Day staple ever since its origin in 1905. The best part? You can totally customize it according to your liking. Yeah, don't be shy to throw in your favorite veggies, add a splash of lemon juice for a bit of brightness, or even some leftover shredded chicken for an extra protein punch. We really need to bring this one back. If these 70s dinners brought back the warmth, drop a comment, like the video, and subscribe so we don't forget the good stuff again.